Good evening. I'm glad you all could join me here on this lovely night. I'm Governor Christopher Blucher Eringhaus, excuse me. As you can see, my final resting place is here, marked by this monument. I served as governor of North Carolina from 1933 to 1937. Now, when you've held high office, they tend to name things after you. This street out here that runs by the cemetery is named Eringhaus, as is a dormitory down at UNC Chapel Hill. So far, I'm the only Elizabeth City native who's ever been elected governor. I was a potato farmer by trade. I was elected the 58th governor of North Carolina in 1932. While I was in office, I established a sales tax, did away with toll roads, and I instituted the first ever publicly sponsored rural electrification project in the nation. Now, if you'll recall, the 1930s were the heart of the Great Depression, worst economic crisis since the Reconstruction era. Times were harder than folks living today can imagine. People did whatever they had to do to survive, really, and to support their families. And as if things weren't hard enough, we were all living with the 18th Amendment to the Constitution, more popularly known as Prohibition. The 18th Amendment prohibited the production, transportation, and sale of alcoholic beverages. You could probably imagine this was a very unpopular law all around the country. And Elizabeth City was certainly no exception. According to our newspaper at the time, The Independent, Elizabeth City was the worst town in North Carolina for liquor traffic. Illegal bars, speakeasies, sprang up all over town, and out in the swamps, moonshiners were brewing up corn liquor as fast as they could. Prominent citizens were financing all this liquor traffic, and of course they made large profits. They were just thumbing their noses at the law. Of course, you can't really blame them. I mean, human nature being what it is, people just found ways around this unpopular law. One enterprising businessman up north of town used to charge a fee so you could view a striped pig. While you're viewing this pig, he'd hand you a free drink. Needless to say, he had a thriving business. Northeastern North Carolina, of course, is well suited for liquor traffic. The swamps, the fields, and forests of this area provide ideal concealment for distilling operations. And the waterways made it easy to transport that illegal hooch up to Norfolk, and of course from there it made its way on up to Washington and New York. In the end, Prohibition was a massive failure. President Hoover had called it the noble experiment. The Constitution is no place for experiments, noble or otherwise. The effects on the nation were largely negative. In the end, more people were drinking and people were drinking more. Alcohol abuse increased. A lot of that illegal hooch, well, it was poor quality. About 1,000 people a year died from tainted liquor. It had an adverse effect on the economy too. Restaurants failed without liquor sales. They closed restaurants, bars, and breweries and distilleries. Widespread job loss occurred. It had an adverse effect on law enforcement. A lot of police officers and revenue officers succumbed to bribes. There was just too much money to be made from liquor trafficking. Well, times were hard. Now, for you race car fans, did you know that NASCAR was born of bootlegging? Yeah, that's right. The moonshiners needed souped-up cars to escape the revenue officers in hot pursuit. They kind of liked those cars. In fact, they enjoyed them so much that, well, America's made an official sport of it. Well, Prohibition was repealed in 1933 during my term as governor, and I was glad to see it go. Well, so was President Roosevelt. Anybody know how President Roosevelt celebrated the denouement of Prohibition? He drank a dirty martini right there in the Oval Office. How about that? Well, I'm reminded that you all have someplace else to go, so I'll just say good night. But now, let me tell you something. I hear there's a speakeasy operating downtown somewhere tonight. Y'all might want to check it out. Don't tell them I sent you. I bid you good night.